Hello, welcome back to Dynamic English Live here on YouTube. I'm your host today, Jesse, and in today's class, we are talking about irregular verbs, okay? Irregular verbs really don't have any rules, and so it's important to memorize them. Now, if we look at our graphics here, I'll show you the typical list of irregular verbs, all right? So Franco, if we can put up that graphic. So here we have the list of the most common irregular verbs, all right? I understand this is a list, okay? And it's not the easiest way to learn irregular verbs. Can we go to the next slide, Franco? So if we see here, you've got a list, and this is very common for your English teachers, anybody really learning English, to see these lists, okay? So with our irregular verbs, you're going to have our present tense, our past tense, and our participle, or our perfect tense. All right. Now, one way that we can memorize these verbs, we can go to the next slide. You'll see some more verbs here. One way that we can memorize these are making cards, okay? So my first tip today is to make cards. So if you see here, I have a card that has the present tense of an irregular verb, see. And on the back, I have the past tense and the participle. So this is a really quick and easy way to memorize the irregular verbs. Now, I've used that word twice now, memorize, now 3 times. But with our irregular verbs, we have to memorize them. There's really no other form or way to memorize or to know, to learn these verbs. So by making these cards, okay, I'll give you another example. Here is to be, and on the back, I have my past tense of was or were, and my participle of been. This is a really easy way to quickly repeat, right, and then memorize these verbs. However, in today's class, I want to talk about grouping verbs, okay? So we've seen our list, and everybody hates the list. It's the worst way to learn verbs, okay? Because what happens is that you will memorize maybe the first part of the list, and then the second and the third, not so much, okay? So it's really important to be able to mix those verbs. If we can go to the first slide of the group, no, let's see, to the first slide of the groups. Okay, so here we have the list. So you're seeing more of the list. Next, here we have groups. So in today's class, if you can see this graphic here, I want you to maybe take a screenshot and look at this graphic and see how we can group our irregular verbs so that they're not so complicated. All right? So if we take a look at our first verb, it's the most important verb in all of English, okay? In Spanish, this verb is both ser and estar. But in English, it's just one, to be. So if you think about ser and estar in Spanish, well, you understand how important this verb really is because we use it every day, all the time, in every conversation, all right? So it's important to realize that with I am, okay, so we'll see here in our present tense, I am, okay? We'll remember that he, she, and it is, and we have are for you, we, and they, right? So to be is a little bit more irregular than most irregular verbs, all right? So if you see there in your past, I was, he was, she was, it was. However, there you have we were, they were, you were. So we need to memorize that our pronouns with to be kind of change sometimes. However, with our participle, we're all equal with been. Okay, so let's repeat that. Been, not been, it's been. And we'll use that participle with our auxiliary verb have. Okay, I have been. Yo he estado. Or ella ha estado. She has been. Okay, so really important. We focus on the verb to be. That's the most important verb. Next, if we go to our next slide, you will notice that we have a lot of irregular verbs that don't change. They stay the same, whether in the present, the past, or the participle. There's no change. Okay, so if we can group those verbs, then it's very easy to remember that bet, 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 cut, 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 put, 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 shut, shut, shut. Okay, no change. They're all the same. So whenever we group these verbs, you'll notice that there's nothing to memorize because this group of verbs stays the same. Okay, so before I move on to the next section, I'm just curious if anyone has any questions. We are streaming right now on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So in any of those platforms, you can ask a question and I can see it here and I will respond to your question live. So I do see some questions here. I see good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the live classes. Okay, I just see comments. But if you do have a question about pronunciation or an irregular verb group in particular, then be sure to ask. So before we move on, I just want everyone to be able to see the graphic that's on the screen here, that this group of verbs never changes. So let me point out, if you notice at the top of that graphic, we have 3 black squares. Okay, so pay attention to those squares because that's going to mean those stay the same. All right, when we move to the further graphics, maybe you'll understand. So I don't see any questions at this point, so let's go to the next slide. All right, next, if you notice those black squares at the top, you're going to notice that these 3 verbs in this group, well, we just change one vowel, all right? So we have become. Then in that middle category of the past, we're going to need to change that to an A, and that's became. And then we go back to the same using an O and become, okay? We see the same thing with come, came, and come. And we have run, which is a little strange because it uses a U and then switches to an A. But for this category here, with these 3 verbs, you see that the past tense, we just need to change it to an A. All we need to do is change the vowel. All right? Can we move to the next slide? All right. Here, you'll notice at the top, we don't have any boxes. We have our vowels. So this group of verbs, we change from I to A to U. And this group of verbs typically confuses a lot of people, okay? I hear a lot of people, especially Spanish speakers, that will switch the U for the A, right? So instead of saying I drank a margarita last night, they will say I drunk a margarita. However, this is not correct because our past simple is with an A, drank. So let's look at this list. If we see begin, began, begun. And I hope that you at home watching are able to repeat the pronunciation of these verbs. Next, the big example here, drink, drank, drunk. All right, be careful with the word drunk because when it's not used as a verb, it's used as a noun, or no, sorry, an adjective. It means borracho, or so it's very important that we focus on the pronunciation of that and say drink, drank, drunk. So with this group of verbs, I think it's really important, like I said, the pronunciation, but that A sound, if we can go back to that A sound in English should always be forced through the nose, okay? So listen again. Begin. Begin in comes from here. Began comes from my nose, and begun comes from my throat, okay? So let's think about it as maybe a mountain. Begin, began, begun. Drink, drank, drunk. What's our next one? Ring, rang, rung. Next we have sing, sang, sung. This is actually one of my favorites because if you say it very fast, it's a lot of fun to say sing, sang, song, sing, sang, song. Sorry, it's just one of my favorites. Next we have sink, sank, sunk, and swim, swam, swum. So if you notice, the inflection of my voice is going to change with each of those those vowel sounds, right? When we go from I to A to U, the I and the U, we produce that sound here. The A is more through our nose, all right? So that's your group of IAU verbs. So before I move on to the next category, if there's any questions, like I said, you can always post your questions here. I have my faithful director and editor, Franco, here behind the scenes to answer all of your questions, or to show me the questions and to show you the graphics. So please do not hesitate to ask questions. Y ahora en español. Si tienes una duda, si tienes preguntas, pregúntame. ¿Ya? Puedes escribir en Facebook, YouTube o en LinkedIn. Estamos transmitiendo en los tres. ¿Ya? Okay, let's move on to the next. So this next category gets a little complicated, but it doesn't have to be. If we notice our squares at the top, we have our base verb, our present tense verb. So let's start with do. And then you see in the next square, there is nothing to do with the past tense. It's a completely different word, okay? And unfortunately, because irregular verbs are, well, irregular, this is something we have to deal with. Because in the past, it's did. However, if you look at that third column, then you're going to see plus in. And really that should be plus in-e or e-in, but plus in. So you'll notice we have do, did, and then done. So we add an in-e. We have draw, drew, and then the same as the present, we just add an in for the participle. So now it's drawn. Next, drive, drive, drove, and then what is our participle when we add that in? Driven, driven. All right, next we have eat, ate. No correlation between those. But if you notice that participle form eaten, all we needed to do was put the e in. So if you pay attention here, whenever we have a verb that ends with a consonant, we're not just going to add the in. We're going to need to put the e in. All right, so just like that example with eat, ate, eaten. Okay, we're always going to need to put that e in if it's with a consonant. So we have fall, fell, and then again we end that word fall with an L, which is a consonant, so we need to put the e in. Fall in. All right. Give, gave, and well, give already ends with a vowel, so there's no need to put an extra e. We'll just put the in. Given. Okay. Next, go, went. Yeah. And then we have that go. G-O, well, ends with a vowel, so let's put the in and the e. Gone. Grow, grew. Again, you have just add an in, grown. We have know, new, add an in, known. Next we have ride, rode, ridden, ridden. Now, why do we double the D before we add that EN? So if you remember to just like our regular verbs or our comparatives and superlatives, anytime in English that we have a single consonant followed by the vowel, a single vowel followed by the consonant, we need to double that consonant, okay? So here we have ridden. The next, not a very common verb, but rise, rose, or risen. Next, just like the example I showed you before on the card, we have see, saw, and seen. So notice the difference here between see and seen. We just added an in because it's in this group. Next we have show, showed. That's a really strange verb there. And then shown, shown. Take, took, taken. And finally, write, wrote, written, written. I hear mispronunciations with that a lot. People say written. However, make sure that we're pronouncing that correctly and saying write, wrote, written. All right. So this is our category where really we just need to add an EN or an N or sometimes an NE. But if we can focus on that group, we're good to go. All right. Now, this next group, if you notice your squares there, this next group is going to be with our past tense and our plus in as the participle. Okay? So, this next group we have where we're going to basically keep the past tense and then just add an in to the participle. All right? So if we look at this, can we enhance that? Yeah. So we have bite, bit. Now again, we have that singular vowel followed by a singular consonant, so I need to double the consonant before I add my ending, which in this case is en, bitten. All right? We have break, broke, but you'll notice there, to change that to the participle, I just need to add an in, broken. Yeah? Choose, chose, chosen. Fly, flew, flown. That was a bit odd, but forget, forgot, forgotten. Again, you see that single O plus the T. That's why in the participle, we need to double the T, then put the E in. Freeze, froze, and frozen. Super popular movie. We have hide, hid, and hidden. Again, you see in hid, single vowel, single consonant, double the consonant. All right. We have lie, lay, and lane. Don't be confused. That's a very old verb. And I'm not sure that any of you would actually be using that verb right now. The verb lie, lay, and lane, very old. Nobody uses that. Next, you'll see that we have steal, stole, and then stolen. Okay? So again, we're just adding an in to the past tense with this group. Let's see. Speak, spoke, spoken. Tear, tore. And now this one's a bit weird because with this irregular verb, we remove the E. We're just going to say torn. T-O-R-N. So not T-O-R-E-N. Yeah, again, it's irregular. We have wake, woke, and woken. And we have wear, wore, and again, just like tear and wear, right? And we can pair those because we always say, wear and tear. If you can remember that wear and tear become wore and tore, which become worn and torn, then they're in their own little group by themselves. So, guys, I'm not seeing any questions. I do see we have people watching, but I guess no one has any questions. So we're going to continue. I think we've only got one more slide to go here, one more group, right? But the idea here is that you are able to put these verbs into their respective groups. And I understand that there's more than, how many are there? There's like 300 irregular verbs in English, 350. So I understand it's not easy to memorize all of them. But if we take them bit by bit or piece by piece, they become a little easier. All right. So hopefully today, with some of my tips, you can begin to group these verbs to where they aren't so complicated for you. Let's see, Fonga, if we could go to the next slide, I think this is our last slide, and it's obviously the longest. So again, you see this list here of verbs, but this might actually be the easiest group of verbs because there's no spelling change between our past and our perfect or our participle tense. So, well, I'm not going to read all of these. You can see here that we have bring, brought, brought, right? Build, built, built. Buy, bought, bought. Catch, caught, caught. Feel, felt, felt. Okay, so our past tense and our participle stay the same with this group. Now, one important thing that I should mention for pronunciation is that on this list, as you can see, we have several verbs. Let's see, we have brought, bought, caught, fought. We have taught, thought. Okay, so just on this list, there's 6 verbs. There are more in English. But I want you to pay attention to the pronunciation there. That O-U-G-H-T or the A-U-G-H-T. Okay? We see that in the past tense and the participle of these verbs. However, that O-U-G-H-T or the A-U-G-H-T is all pronounced the same. Ought. Okay? So those of you watching at home, repeat the word wrote, robot, ought, robot, ought. Okay? Many times I hear people try to pronounce the G or the H and they say cout or bout or tout. However, it's just ought. So it doesn't matter if it's spelled with an A-U-G-H-T or an O-U-G-H-T. The pronunciation of ought stays the same. All right? So if we continue with this list here, we've got a few others that are very important, especially get, got, and got. Right? Very important verb. We have, had, and had. Make, made, and made. Very important verb. Shoot, shot, and shot. Okay. So if we notice here on this list, your past tense and your participle, they stay the same. There's no change. So please, if anybody has any questions about our irregular verbs, about these groups, maybe about pronunciation, you can leave us a comment now and ask a question. We'll be here live for a few more minutes. While I'm waiting on your questions, I do want to take a moment to remind everyone that for the next 2 days until Friday, October 7th, Dynamic English is having our Cyber Week. So we are currently offering 10% off of our individual courses and 20% off of our group courses. And I've worked for Dynamic for a while, and we rarely, almost never, offer 20%. So if you are interested in improving your English, maybe improving your irregular verbs, and being able to practice these irregular verbs with a native English-speaking teacher, you should take advantage of our Cyber Week discounts. They will end on Friday at midnight. So if you're interested, my recommendation is that you go to our website at dynamicenglish.cl or contact us here through YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn, and we will respond to you. So if you are interested in a class, please let us know. Cyber Week. All right. So I still don't see any questions. So I guess everyone's okay? All right. So with that, I hope that maybe the tricks, the suggestions that I've given you about making cards and about grouping your irregular verbs, maybe, hopefully, you can make these a little easier to understand because they don't have to be complicated. However, I will say it's very important to memorize them. The only thing as an English teacher that I will ever tell you to memorize in English is irregular verbs. All right. So I hope everyone has enjoyed today's broadcast. Please join us back here in 2 weeks for another Instagram Live where we will be speaking about the differences between make and do, specifically 2 irregular verbs. So we're going to continue with irregular verbs, but specifically make and do. And how do we use them? Why are they different? All right. So one last look at, are there any questions, any comments? No, we're good. All right. I thank you all for joining us. If you haven't already done so, be sure to click that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications here on our YouTube account. It really means a lot to us, and it means you will be first to know about our new videos, our live classes, and all of the promotions that we offer. So be sure to click that button and leave us a comment. If you were not able to watch this class live, I understand, it will be recorded, so you can always watch it after, all right? But be sure to click that subscribe button, smash the likes, and leave us a comment. So from all of us here at Dynamic English, thank you for watching. It's been a pleasure, and I hope that everyone can maybe start to understand irregular verbs just a little bit more. Yeah? So, as again I said, from all of us, see you next time. Take care.